Hey guys, welcome back to part two of our conversation with James Wiley. He is running for Secretary of State as a Libertarian in Colorado. We're having a very interesting conversation about a lot of things from Palantir, corporate corruption in the government, APAC, a lot of different things. Let's jump back into it and let's see, where were we, James? James, your picture's a little blurry, actually. There you go. There you go. You just need to move a little closer.
Okay. Can you see me now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Now, another topic I wanted to talk about was oh, actually, no, you blurred out again. I think you need to move a little closer.
I'm sitting back and relaxing too much, so I'll try to sit up.
I got you, brother. It's Sunday. That's what it's for. Oh, you blurred out on me again.
How close do I need to be?
Ah, man. Yeah, you cleared up now.
Okay. I'll just stay right here then.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I hope your neck
You're
is
you're
okay.
good. It's comfy.
Okay, now, corporations is a big thing that I preach about all the time because they're just getting too much control. They're going in, they're consolidating everything, they're buying up a lot of other small businesses, and you're basically seeing a return to monopolies like you had seen 100 years ago. But they somewhat disguise themselves instead of being a straight out monopoly. It's more of a oligopoly or however you would call it. It's more like three big companies that control everything or five big companies. But these companies all get together and they basically negotiate on a pretty standard price and a lot of other practices of business. And there's not really much competition or flexibility. So I don't know. I'm just thinking we really need to revisit and revise the Sherman Antitrust Act and go after some of these big companies. Like Google, for example, I think is a company that's a little too large. It should probably be broken down into smaller pieces. Walmart is the same way. Probably Lockheed Martin. A lot of these big companies need to be broken down into smaller companies.
Yeah, there's definitely some great examples of monopolies or oligopolies and the effective monopoly of multiple different entities working together in a cartel to achieve a monopolistic benefits for themselves. We also have common ownership, and I think that's a more hidden and more nefarious problem than we have. I don't know if I go out there and I buy some Pepsi stock and I buy some Coke stock and I've got a vote in each one. Yeah, I could vote for my interest through each one, and I want the new drink to come out and lobby for that. But I'm only one person. I can only buy so much stock. There's not so much influence. But when you have BlackRock, Vanguard, some of these larger money managers who own shares of each other and own shares of both Pepsi and Coke, and not just small numbers like I would as a private retail investor, but larger institutional investment levels of ownership, 10% or more, which get board member seats and other influence within these corporations. And then they own components of each other. And so that's really a common interest that's being advocated in that capacity. Then the antitrust question becomes a lot more difficult because it's a common interest which is being pursued, but through multiple different faces. And so if I were to update the Sherman Act today, I would say that no institutional investor could hold shares in competing entities. And so, for example, if you owned as an institutional investor, if you own shares in BlackRock, you could not also own Vanguard because as money managers, they're competing against each other. And so that starts to break apart some of those elements of interrelationship between the ownership there. And then also if You have a company that owns a large, if Vanguard owns a large percentage of Microsoft and a large percentage of Google, them being direct competitors, they would have to pick one side or the other. And so I think that would make it much more clear the nature of these entities instead of everything looking brown by the time you mix it all together. We would actually be able to separate out the ownership and if somebody wants to support Coke, they could invest in the money manager that invests in Coke, knowing that they're not also going to be investing in Pepsi at that point. That seems mundane, but I try to keep it mundane because I don't want to talk about the millions of lives that are being lost around the world as a result of the influence of the corporate entities, specifically those related to defense contracting.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of lives that get lost because of it, and there's other impacts as well. Like Coca-Cola is the world's largest polluter because they create so much plastic. And I think that the whole creating plastic and then expecting you to recycle is a funny thing because like they put all the responsibility on you to make sure that that product doesn't end up somewhere and it needs to get recycled. Recycling isn't actually as efficient as a lot of people think it is, and those companies themselves should have to have a responsibility to figure out some way to take care of this waste that their product is making. They have to have some sort of stewardship over the effect of their product and the packaging of their product. Wouldn't you agree?
Uh, Well, I would shy away from regulatory interference with that, but there should be a social or societal response to the damage that these corporations do to the public, the common environment that we all share. And I would say if that involves litigation, sure, but I think the market could resolve some of these issues directly. Glass and aluminum are much more recyclable than plastic, absolutely. And so you see aluminum gaining additional traction as a green material. Obviously, there's some toxic concerns related to aluminum itself, but as long as it's recycled, it stays out of landfills, it stays out of the environment, and it continues to be used for that purpose again and again. Glass. Who doesn't like to drink a cold Coke out of a glass bottle? That's always been the luxury grade of consumption of Coca-Cola, especially coming from Mexico. So can we bring that back? I don't know, double the price. That's okay as far as I'm concerned. I don't drink sugar anyway, so this is going to affect me. But I think it's important that we take into account some of the effects that this will have on future generations, and hopefully there will be a drink production company that does make these choices, and I hope that the public, the free market, will choose and vote with their dollar to advance that corporation as opposed to the other polluters.
Yeah. And then another thing that I've thought of is I understand it is a branch of healthy capitalism and you want to invest in a company and get a return out of that company. That is why you made the investment. But it also gets to the point to where courts have ruled that a company has a responsibility and a fiduciary duty to worry about the profit of their stockholders at the end of the day. So if it comes to sacrificing the standard of work or their quality of work environment for their workers, cutting corners in regulations and environmental regulations, other things, whatever they can do to cut corners as long as they give profit to their stockholders, they have a fiduciary duty to do so. Do you think some of that has like injected some poisonous business practices and just overall not seeing investment back into like the labor force and some of the other things you'd like to see rather than just all the money going into the pocket of the billionaire investors?
Chrysler v. Ford, that was a got a feedback.
No, I
Okay.
think I can hear you good.
Okay. Chrysler v. Ford, back 100 years ago, was the landmark case that produced that result where Ford wanted to give a massive raise to its employees because it was an extremely profitable and productive company, revolutionizing the transportation industry, kind of like Tesla is doing today. And we have this lawsuit by Chrysler against Ford because they want to ensure that Ford cannot be as competitive in the labor market specifically because in Detroit area, like they're both competing for the same labor pool. And so if Ford all of a sudden is offering much higher prices, then Chrysler is going to have to compete with that for day labor. And Chrysler didn't want to do that. So rather than compete on a free market, they sued to cause the US government to order Ford not to raise the salaries of their workers because it wasn't in the best interest of the shareholders. Ford is privately owned. It always has been, but still, their hands were tied by the regulatory agencies in what they were going to do for the benefit of the people. And as a result of that, we've seen many other examples of profit being put before anything else. And I think in general, profit is not a bad thing. It's like money is it good or evil? It doesn't really matter. It's a currency. It's like water. It flows, and there's pressure behind it. There's fluctuations and all of those components. So it's just a force of nature, really. But when you have interference in the free market by requiring that the leadership of Ford could not come out and make the choices that they felt were necessary at that time for whatever reason, such as giving raises, then you're not just affecting the free market, you're also affecting free will, the pursuit of happiness, like a lot of other civil rights and natural and inalienable rights as well by that coercion. And so I don't think that's necessarily appropriate. And I don't know if at this late hour that could be reversed, but I think we don't need to necessarily look towards beyond shareholder value to stakeholder value and look for the customers and the suppliers and up and downstream and the supply chain for stakeholders. I think we could look for the interest of shareholders and say, hey, the interest of shareholders is not always profit. Sometimes it's reputation. Sometimes it's doing the right thing and being the savior of the working class at a specific time and point in history. And if we saw more examples of the interests of shareholders being honored, not specifically on the quantitative level, but in their natural rights to make decisions for their own company level, that's maybe more subjective, but no less important.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that because the reputation is important to them besides just the profit. Now, I had an idea before that in a somewhat socialist structured government, you would see some of the businesses work in the way that all of the employees own a stock in the company. They're all owners of said company. And some of them are even structured in the way to where the CEO of said company cannot make more than 50 times what the base worker of the company makes. And every time that said company has quarterly profits, they reinvest back into the employees, give bonuses, all this other stuff. Now, it has its issues too whenever you try to employ that on a grand scale. There's usually a lot of high taxes involved and stuff like that. But the idea that I had was if you had more companies here in the United States doing a model like that, and it started as a small business and then, got up to being a large company before it was corporate model, before it was really publicly traded, and you had it to where, like I said, all the employees are owning a part of the company, and you don't have this fiduciary duty to stockholders, and you don't have the CEO taking home all kinds of money and giving himself a bonus. He's maxed out on a certain thing. Now, people are voluntarily starting those companies and doing it by their own will. Now, what if you somehow had a model to where a company had to openly tell you what type of company they are whenever they do business with you? So therefore, you have the option to, if I want to hire this company to do this large painting job on my business, then we have one company. that is a employee owned company, and then we have another one that is a large company that is publicly traded. Now, they both disclose that information to me whenever they bid the job. And a lot of the times I would choose the employee owned company because I know the money is going back to them more than to profits for stockholders. So it's more or less you're not regulating the market and making people do this, but when people voluntarily start these businesses, you somewhat provide a model where people want to choose them because they're like, oh, wow, it helps the employees more rather than just pure profit. What do you think about that?
Again, as the libertarian, I would shy away from the involvement of the government in coercing any specific form of marketing, like they have to disclose this or that. But we often see it where companies that have that model will promote that as a major incentive to do business with them. Fat Tire is a popular beer here in Colorado that's brewed by a company that's owned by the shareholders. Seize the means of production by all means. Go out and start your own business. That's that's what it means to seize the means of production. Or if you get in a position where you can buy stock in the company you work for, or have it awarded to you as part of your salary, that's those are all means of seizing the means of production, which don't involve a violent, bloody revolution. So I would definitely encourage that model. I think it's incredible. We see one example, Edward Jones. We don't often think about that as being that model, but it is the management, the leadership of Edward Jones is comprised of the investment advisors from the bottom up, and so it's not owned by a larger investment firm itself, but it is employee owned, and so you have a lot of examples of that co-ops in agricultural communities. You see that a lot, whether it's more of like a membership co-op or an employee co-op that is much more tied to the environment in which that exists. You have electric co-ops, you have agricultural like grain elevators and other things that are owned by the farmers in the community who all contribute and then utilize the benefits of that. Wonderful models, wonderful, and I definitely encourage that. The more distance you get from management and the people that are working and or receiving services, the more dystopian that experience is going to be for the people on the far end. And so we need to make that closer. We need more small business, less large corporations, and I think one of the major issues with that is overregulation. When you have regulations that are such a burden to an economy where you need a large percentage of your revenue dedicated to regulatory compliance, that's a burden of entry for new competitors. It makes it effectively monopolistic, and when you can only have a few companies afford the number of lawyers and accountants and everything that goes into compliance, that actually is anti-competitive.
Yeah,
And getting the government out of the way is what we need.
that's a perfect example of how like the Green New Deal and a lot of the environmentally friendly policies, I'm using the air quotes, that the Democrats have tried to push, is a lot of that has just been business regulation that is crushing small business because the corporations can afford to buy a fleet of electric vehicles. They can afford to buy a bunch of solar panels to put on their buildings. But then, whenever you put some of these regulations on smaller businesses, they can't afford to just upgrade to all this technology. A lot of people are still driving around in a 2005 Chevy van trying to get every mile out of it they can. So,
And these corporations have gobs and gobs of middle management and then these massive salaries on the top that they need to support. And they raise their prices in order to do that and eliminate competition in order to maintain their market share. It's not American, not at all.
yeah. Now, like you said, more small business, less corporation. Now, I know you shy away from regulation, but in general, I kind of believe in, not having very much regulation at all on small to medium business. But corporations, that's whenever you need to start doing something because they start growing too big. We might disagree on that one, but there's different ways to approach it. Now, on that same subject, here in Tennessee, There, in 2026, we're voting on an issue. It's called the Homes Not Hedge Funds Act, and it
Mm.
stops corporations like BlackRock from buying up a lot of single family homes in a region. Now, the bill specifically says that it would stop BlackRock, Vanguard, other companies like that from buying more than 100 homes in a single county. Now, I don't want them to even own that many homes, but what is your opinion on that type of regulation? Because in my opinion, that's really necessary. I don't want to see these private equity firms buy up all the single family homes, turn them all into rental houses, shrink the amount of houses that are on the market to where the price shoots up so much. Young people will never be able to get into a home, and you're basically looking at the modern version of feudalism because everybody are renters and they don't own where they live.
This is extremely complex, and
It,
the comment that you made earlier about Blackstone, not BlackRock, being the major owner of properties, and BlackRock being the owner of Blackstone, that is definitely a concern. What I would what I would ask is there something else going on here though? Because 2008 was devastating to the market, to the public in general, but specifically to a lot of these corporations. And is their activity entering the housing market as buyers? Is that not an artificial weight on the market to prop it up? And in my mind, it is. I think we're long overdue for a market correction. And year after year passes and the prices keep going up. Something's got to give. And at some point, there's going to be a cash flow issue in my mind that despite their continual purchase of properties and their inflation of the purchase price of properties, they won't be able to fill them with renters. And ultimately that the renting market is going to separate itself from the housing purchase market, and we're going to see a collapse in rent prices. We're already seeing that in areas like Denver, where the rental prices are collapsing. The housing prices continue to go up somehow, but the rental is collapsing, and that's going to create cash flow issues for these mega corporations, where they're trying to delay the correction in the market in one form, but by loading up on that asset, only to find ultimately it's going to be worth absolutely nothing. And so we're, I think the correction is going to be much worse than otherwise as a result of that artificial inflation. So my reaction wouldn't be to regulate the purchase of that necessarily, but um, to like well this gets a little bit complicated because it seems like such a coordinated effort. It might be monopolistic and require antitrust action
yeah,
ultimately. And so that would be the point to involve the government in a regulatory capacity, though I think this is going to be corrected regardless. And my only hope is that the consequences for these corporations for their interference in the free market, just as much as the mortgage industry was corrupted and skewed and everything uh, almost 20 years ago now, it's going to be much worse this time. And my hope is that we can get some real consequences for these corporations,
yeah,
let them go bankrupt, uh, don't don't let them get bailed out like they did last
yeah.
time,
See,
and let the whole thing collapse. And then I could buy a really nice house for $100,000 again. So
yeah, that's it.
that could be the future.
That's it.
It would be a painful transition.
I agree with you. Let it all crash. Let the bubble pop. Let
Mhm.
it all crash. It's going to be a little rough for some people, but after we pick all the pieces up, the market is going to balance itself out. It's going to actually be supply and demand again. And like you said, you're going to be able to actually buy a nice house for $100,000. Because my home, when I bought, from the time I bought it right before COVID to present day when we just got our reevaluation for taxes in the county. my home has gone up in value like $130,000. And that's a bubble. That's not real money. Everybody the past couple of years has been like, oh, wow, I have so much value because my home is worth this and this and this. No, it is a bubble. It is not real. It is inflated value, inflated money, and I know that bubble is going to pop. So that's why I'm just writing out what I have. I'm making sure my savings are good. I have, gold and silver that I've bought, other things like that. And I'm not going out and getting a bunch of crazy equity loans on my home just so the value of that can pop and I'm just screwed.
There are two other major forces that weren't in play in 2008 and are in play today. COVID, which is causing massive infertility and population collapse. Long COVID, which is killing people still today. The vaccine injuries, which is killing people still today.
Hmm.
That is a huge impact on our population. Decrease in population results in decrease in demand for housing.
Yeah.
That was supplemented by immigration and artificially propped up by government funding of immigrants and whatnot. So that money was coming from the government, the immigrants' pockets, into landlords' pockets, landlords being Blackstone, BlackRock,
Yeah.
and then allowing them to continue to demonstrate cash flow to banks in order to finance the purchase of additional properties. But when you lose the massive influx of immigrants, which we're now seeing happen, when you lose your own population due to a massive die-off and inability, infertility issues, then we get in a position where the value of the human goes way up and the value of stuff goes way down because there's way too few humans, and so they're in demand versus the stuff. Well, three houses for every person who really needs one. So I think we're moving in that direction, and we're going to probably hit a very severe correction within a couple of years.
And speaking of infertility, COVID did, massively change people, like long-term COVID. It I don't know the wording. I want to say it changed your DNA a little bit. That's not necessarily the wording I'm trying to use, but COVID really affected people's lives, and it hit people harder than we thought. And the death rate wasn't as high as we thought it would be. It was more or less something that once you got it changed you, it affected you in some way. I don't think the outcome was death overall. And yeah, it was a strange thing. But on the same subject of infertility, studies have been done multiple times, and finally, a I can't remember who, but an individual from the regulatory systems of the government have come out and said there is birth control in the tap water, and that is because when women take birth control, they urinate it out later and it goes into the tap water. When it goes into the sanitation filtration systems, water treatment plants, it does not treat for hormones. It does not separate hormones. So over time, you have a massive buildup of hormones in the tap water that is causing people to be infertile. And is also, we have um, not just hormones, we have other chemicals like atrazine that is entered, and it's causing a lot of weird things. It's causing some people to not develop properly in puberty, a lot of issues. And that is just something that has recently been confirmed that is in our tap water. And when I tried to explain this to somebody the other day, they said, "Oh yeah, I understand. We have different political views. I understand you believe different things than me." And I said, "Dude, that's not a political view. I'm literally telling you what Google just confirmed to me, that there is birth control in the tap water. That is
Pour
just a
them a
fact."
glass, see if they'll drink it.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, yeah, we've got a lot of problems.
Alex Jones said it best. They're turning the freaking frogs gay.
I didn't want to bring it there, I didn't want to put that on your name, but if you want to bring it there, I'm all
Yeah,
for it.
And he's right, because whether it's plastics or the hormones themselves from birth control or other hormone applications we're seeing in this day and age,
Yeah.
that's a big deal. And so I hope you use filter on your water, no matter who you are, no matter where you are. If
Definitely.
somebody
Yeah.
is upstream from you, no.
Yeah, that's right, guys. If you take one thing away from this conversation, use a freaking water filter. Don't drink the tap water because, yeah, the government is not taking care of you on that angle. Okay, James, we're getting to the end of this other conversation. I don't know if you want to do a part three, but that's it, guys. I'll figure out how to do a continuous recording next time. I promise. Do you want to do a part three?